God, I really hope that this is in focus. Hello, wonderful people who've decided to click on this video. My name's Y, and instead of focusing on my DreamWorks episode 2 video, which I probably should have done instead, I want to talk about Trolls World Tour. So start off, Trolls World Tour. Why did I pick this? So for me, I have this really nasty fun habit of when I'm watching a movie, like a kids movie usually, I just go like way too deep into the analysis of it to a point where like obviously the creators of this movie weren't thinking that hard, but I sure was. And I find Trolls World Tour to be an interesting example of doing this because I think it's actually a really good movie to apply like critical race theory to. It talks a lot about like colonialism and imperialism. There's like this weird span of like late 2010s movies that like talks about, I thought we were a great kingdom country or whatever, but turns out our ancestors were colonizers and built off this nation off of genocide, pain, and murder. Gee, I wonder why that became popular. And some other movies that do this is, hold on, I have this on my letterbox. Sequels where the protagonists discover their ancestors were colonizers and try to destroy the entire population while portraying this in a family-friendly manner that was made in the late 2010s. That's like my letterbox list, see? Oh my gosh, no. It's not going to focus because it's focusing on me, but you get the point. On this list, including Trolls World Tour, are Frozen 2, Thor Ragnarok, and Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel isn't a sequel. But it's a part of Marvel, which is like a sequel-esque type multi-universe thing, so it counts. And out of all those movies, I think Trolls World Tour does it the best. So I want to talk about it, and hopefully this is entertaining. Disclaimer, this video's mostly humor, but it applies like real theory / concerns. But I do think it's interesting how they go about it, especially how they use music, which I will get into later. And I wanted to talk about this, so don't take this video too seriously, but hopefully you learn a few things or even learn how to like view movies, and we'll see where this takes us. So with that, let's get into some fun facts about Trolls World Tour, and let's get into the summary. Also, if you find this video really interesting, then I recommend watching my first episode for the DreamWorks analysis video. That should be here or here, or I don't fully know how YouTube works with the clicky things, but it'll be somewhere to watch. So some fun facts about Trolls World Tour. Oh my gosh, I can't say this word. I have a lisp, so this is gonna be fun. So Trolls World Tour had the unfortunate luck of coming out, what was it? Oh yes, March 19th, 2020, approximately 3 days after the entire nation shut down. Or at least my college shut down, so I assume the entire nation shut down then too. So this movie kind of did two things. It simultaneously, like, I felt like almost killed AMC as a consequence, and it also bombed badly but succeeded very goodly, so it's kind of weird. So like box office wise, they made $49.1 million according to a very simple Google search. However, because they were still switching over to so they could like have like the on-demand stuff that was happening during COVID, where you could buy movies on that like immediately for the release. So with that, they actually did really good and succeeded. I don't feel like looking up the amount. I'll probably put that in my DreamWorks video for part 4, so watch that. So AMC is like, fine, because you decided to put your films on demand instead of putting them all releasing for movie theaters, we're not going to release or premiere any Universal movies. And I think they rescinded that, considering Fast 9 is Universal, if I'm correct, and there were trailers for that, so I'm assuming everything's cool now. But that was like the big old threat back then, and it created entire controversy with like what to do for movies with COVID and blah 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 blah. I don't care, that's not the point of this video. My introduction to the Trolls World Tour cinematic universe is, I think I saw this movie on Hulu like maybe like October, November for the first time, and because I was still like doing research for my DreamWorks vid at the time, and I went into the movie, and I think this is the big part why I really like it. I went into the movie wanting a silly, dumb sequel. I wasn't expecting it to be great. I don't know if I've actually seen the first one. I think I have. I can't tell anymore. But I wasn't like going here expecting a masterpiece, and I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, which works for me. So either way, I went into this movie and I was just like, wow, because like it's very obvious. It hits you in the face with how obvious it is with like the imperialism, colonialism type shit stuff. I don't know which one we're gonna say. We got censors. And yeah, so with that, I'm just gonna get into a brief summary. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Trolls World Tour, I can't say that word, with the Trolls World Tour movie, it stars about two main people. We have Poppy and Branch. Though Poppy, there's a few others that come from the first movie and onward, but they're really not that big of a character, except for Cooper. Cooper's my favorite. I love him. So the first movie is just about like trolls, right? But in this movie, we get an expanded Trolls universe. To be fair, DreamWorks is actually really good at making sequels like that. Like, they really expand on the world. But an expanded Trolls universe where they're not just trolls, they're pop trolls. Also, both movies are jukebox musicals. If you're not aware of that, so that's there too. So Poppy is the princess, now queen in the sequel of the pop trolls, and Branch is like her little sidekick friend. I think Branch likes her romantically, but I'm honestly not 100% sure, and I kind of like that. So Poppy's like a really like happy pop troll, and then Branch, he's more of like a grumpy pop troll, but he's played by Justin Timberlake, so how grumpy can you be when you are played by that man? We're gonna do really quick points. Antagonist is Queen Barb. She's a hard rock troll, and she wants to unite all the strings so we can have, and I quote, one nation of trolls. And if that doesn't start getting your little like imperialism, ethno-nationalism bells ringing, I don't know what else will. So throughout this video, I used the words colonization and imperialism pretty like interchangeably. However, there is a difference, and I just wanted to specify that difference for you. So colonization has to do more with like the physical act of going one place and then setting up colonies in that place. It still has a lot of the acts of imperialism, but it's more about the specific going to a place. So think classic British colonization of North America with the United States and Canada. However, imperialism is more broader than that. It's more about taking over, let's say, the political power of a place, or taking over the economical power of a place. A good example of that is how we think of countries like England, Belgium, and France, and what they did to Africa and the different countries in that, and how they took over and made their own like political power there. So that's a big difference, and after lots of thought, I would like to say, after thinking about how Trolls World Tour does it, I would view Queen Barb as an imperialist versus a colonist, because her goal isn't to just like create a whole bunch of rock colonies and take over that way. She is completely taking over the political and economic power of these different worlds and changing them from that way. So with that, Barb is an imperialist. I am probably the only one to think this hard about Trolls World Tour. But yeah, so back to the video. So there are 6 strings for each troll people group. So there's like techno, funk, classical, pop, country, and hard rock. So Barb is a hard rock, Poppy and Branch are pop trolls. So the movie starts off with Barb like completely and utterly destroying the culture of the techno trolls, taking most of them away from their land, and then taking their most like prized thing, which is like their string. And then Barb basically sends like a threatening letter to Poppy, which is like something on the lines of like, come give me your string. And Poppy's like, she just want to be friends, because Poppy's a dumbass. But she is my second favorite character named Poppy, who I've viewed in media. The first will always belong to this book. Basically, due to that, Poppy then learns what her father tells her about her ancestry, which is that long ago, the 6 strings and 6 different types of trolls lived in harmony. Imagine the breaking up of the 6 string group as sort of being like a Babylon of sorts, where everyone was able to play their own music and then they all like dispersed and separated themselves from each other. And so Poppy's like, whoa, we gotta be in harmony because we all gotta be one big family again. So she and Branch sneak off to go do that. However, Cooper, my favorite troll, I love him dearly. So Cooper looks at the map and realizes, hey, those specific trolls look like me. Let's go find them. And we're going to put a pin in that, like a hard pin, because we're going to focus on that later. So back to Poppy and Branch. So they're basically not fighting. Poppy's just being really, I'm not gonna use the word dumb, but she's just not listening, which is the thing that the movie calls her out. She's just not listening to Branch when Branch is bringing up valid concerns about going up to talk to Barb, because he's worried that Barb doesn't have good intentions, but Poppy's like, oh no, no weapons, no anything, good intentions all around. And then they make it to Symphonyville, and I love this movie. So Symphonyville is where the classical movie trolls come in, right? Except when they go in, Poppy and Branch just see an entire destroyed town that's full with fire and like no survivors, and there's like hard rock like stuff, like it's like actually really cutely embroidered on everything. This entire movie has like a really cute craft aesthetic. And then you see this little flute whistle called Penny Whistle, and she's like coughing and like injured, and she's just like, oh, Barb came and destroyed our entire town, and I'm the only survivor, so Barb took all the classical trolls and the main guy, the leader of the classical trolls. It's we learn later that Barb plans to use all the people she kidnapped as hard rock zombies. So, I don't know about you, but I have a very specific word for people who are taken without their consent to a new land. But I think it's good. It's honestly like a really cute, sad scene, and it gets even sadder because Poppy and Branch are like, we're gonna fix this, because now Poppy realizes Barb is bad news. But then Penny Whistle's like, no, I must stay and rebuild, and so she like starts to like shove 2 dirt together to create a building thing. And as Poppy and Branch leave, the camera zooms out and we just see like the thing she worked hard to build just like crumble. It crumbles and it goes away, and she just goes like, oh. I love it. Flash to Barb, where Barb basically gets these different types of trolls. There are smooth jazz trolls, K-pop trolls, reggaeton trolls, and they're like, hey, I'm gonna take over this entire nation with rock music, but if you find me Poppy, I'll let you stay in your little corner and keep your music. So in a way, because Barb's trying to be like the majority music person, she's trying to turn the minority trolls against each other in order to benefit her own personal goals. You see where the metaphors come in? Also, fun fact, I didn't know that reggaeton was a thing. For some family background, part of my family comes from the VI, so the Virgin Islands. So whenever I think reggae, I think like English reggae. So I'm not gonna lie, I can officially say that Trolls World Tour taught me that reggaeton is a thing and that Spanish reggae exists. So it's a good job. So Poppy and Branch make it a country troll town village thing, and Poppy's like, ew, their music's so sad, and Branch is like, I kind of like the sad, and like Poppy's again being very ignorant, but we're gonna get into that later. And blah blah blah, there's some antics I don't want to get into, they don't really do anything, and we're gonna move on to where Poppy, Branch, and like a new friend, I forget his name, Hickory, a new Hickory friend, they get abducted by the funk trolls. And what am I tell you? So I love these funk trolls very dearly because they are one of my favorite black-coded characters I've ever seen. Most of their hairstyles, because like this movie relies on like a really heavy craft aesthetic that I really like, so like all their hair is like either like yarn or like into like these, like, if you ever like stuck cloth together, like in like dreads. Some of them have like full-on cute little afros. They got it going on in Funk City. I'm sorry, it's called Vibe City. And so we learn that Cooper, the troll from earlier, is a funk troll. We're gonna get into the intersectionality of it. I think they handle Cooper's identity very well in this movie, where he accepts that he's like part funk, part pop, and that both can exist together within him. So Cooper is like a prince, and he has his other brother named Prince D. His mother and father, so the king's name is Quincy, and the mother's name is Essence. So like you don't name a white lady Essence. Her hair is in like beautiful dreads, like yarn dreads, and I love it. This is the part where the funk trolls explain what really happened with the 6 strings that her father was telling her earlier. And they tell her and expose the fact that, oh no, the reason why we all separated is because the pop trolls tried to take all of the strings and only play pop. In response to this, I'm just gonna read this. I'm sorry, my computer's all the way over here. So Poppy, after learning this history, goes, "That's not what is said in our scrapbooks." And Prince D says in response, "Scrapbooks, those were cut out, glued, and glittered by the winners." I love it. Like, that's great. That's great. Okay, we got one more good quote. So then after that, Poppy's like, "Okay, we need to show Barb that we're all the same and that there's no need to switch us around." And this is where I think the movie, like, on a serious note, like, does a really good job with addressing, like, pluralism versus homogeny. Because King Quincy and Queen Essence like say in response that, but we're not all the same. It's why all our strings are different, because they reflect our different music. Denying our differences is denying the truth of who we are. I genuinely really like that, because I feel like a lot, and I don't think this movie's generally trying to do something with it, but I think a lot of times whenever we talk about race in America, probably in other places, but I'm just familiar with American racism, it's the idea that the whole idea of I don't see color, or I don't treat anyone differently because of what they look like. And I think that mindset, like in this, kind of really erases a lot of the nuances, the differences between different cultures, and how we all react to each other. And I think the idea of trying to create or thinking that we're all the same really denies our own specific cultures and experiences, especially in America, where there's so many different groups of people that it's impossible to create a homogenized culture without erasing so much of what makes everyone everyone. And I think this movie does a fairly good job of addressing that as a thing. So blah blah blah, more antics happen. Barb ends up like destroying or coming to the funk trolls, taking their string, all that fun jazz. That's not the point. Moving on, Branch and Poppy fight. Branch rightfully calls out Poppy for being ignorant and not listening to what Branch is saying at all, because Branch has a few good points, and that's valid. And I think they do a really good job of establishing like how to communicate properly with someone who you love. There's other stuff that happens, but nothing really important to the story, so let's just say eventually Poppy gets kidnapped by Queen Barb, and they all make it to like the big final third act set piece, which is like a Barb's concert, and she has all the strings now. And I don't know why I have it in here, but I'm just gonna say this quote, 'cause I'm assuming someone said it, I just didn't say who said it. It's that a world where everyone looks the same and sound the same, that's not harmony. Wow. Blah blah blah. So end piece. So Barb has like the 6 strings on this guitar, and Poppy, being Poppy's like, okay, I'm gonna fix things. So what she does is she destroys the guitar. However, in the process of destroying the guitar, she also destroys the strings. And what I consider to be like a genuinely kind of moving piece. Now that the strings are destroyed, all of the color, all of the sound, all of the music that each of the trolls had disappears, and then they're all just sitting in like this black and white world, and it's quiet and shocking. And like with this awkward silence, the one thing I don't like is they continue to blame Barb when that was very obviously Poppy's fault. I find it interesting that she is a pop troll is also the one who almost legitimately destroys everyone's cultures and entire things that make them unique. So good job, pop trolls, you're doing good, buddies. So my boy Cooper, I love him, ends up saving the day due to like his heart starts like glowing pink like a pop troll, and he uses the beat of the music to start to create a new melody, a new song, and then other people join in, and then eventually it becomes an entire thing where everyone's hearts, and then they start to make the music themselves. The strings don't come back, but then we learn, because Queen Essence says it, and I love Queen Essence because she's a black woman and black women just always spit truths, is that music comes from inside us. It comes from our experiences, our lives, our culture. First of all, that's great. Second of all, I do think that says a lot about how I guess we view things, because this movie does this thing where music can be just music, but also if you think about how people view music in a way of, like, people think certain genres are better than others, or sadder, or not as important, or not as good. And I think this movie plays a lot with that. I'm gonna call, like, I guess, like, musical exceptionism. Don't know if that's a word. That's a word I'm calling it, though. And then if you think of it a bit deeper, if you view music as a way of, like, expressing one's culture, and when you think about how music, a lot of it is very, like, cultural, and the fact that, honestly, a lot of these types of music originated from black people, or different things like that, and you see how they all kind of relate to each other. And if you think about the racial side that music has, then I think this whole metaphor of race makes a lot of sense, and I think it kind of works for this story. So, like I said, this movie ends, like, a little off, because they kind of take the message of, well, all our ancestors did bad things, so we all can change, when I'm just like, no, that's not what happened. The pop trolls ruined things, then the rock trolls tried to, like, make things worse by imperializing everyone, and the other groups of people, they were just chilling and having fun with themselves. So, it's not everyone's fault, it's your two fault, so deal with that. So that's the end of the summary, and I wanted to talk particularly about Cooper in this movie, so let's get into that. Ooh, battery change. Moving on. So, Cooper is my favorite boy. He's the bestest boy. And I really want to briefly talk about his entire message. So, Cooper is a character who, like I said in the summary, is different from the other Paw Patrols. He is not from there. In the first movie, I don't think this is addressed. Again, I haven't really watched the first movie, so don't quote me on that. But in the second movie, when Cooper realizes that he's not alone and that there are trolls who are like him, he decides to leave his home and go find those who look like him. And he learns the reason why he ended up living with the Paw Patrols is because he was taken as a baby. It's not anything deeper than that. It's not like I can't, even if I wanted to, put some deeper, like, imperial message on how people were taken and then pushed to other places, because a bird literally just took his egg and dropped him off there. So it's really nothing much. However, when Poppy and Cooper eventually meet up at Vibe City, Poppy asks Cooper if is he a pop troll or a funk troll now, and his answer is, I'm both. He's not just a pop troll, he's not just a funk troll, he's both of those things, and he's allowed to be both of those things because you don't just have to be one. Prince D, his Cooper's brother, he was like, yeah, I'm not even a funk troll, I'm a hip-hop troll. And I think Cooper's thing of being both works very well, because I like to believe it can be pushed to be a metaphor about mixed people, I believe, or even people who, like, grew up in environments not similar to theirs. So let's say, like, I, like, halfway grew up surrounded by a whole bunch of white people. So on one hand, I feel very white sometimes, but also I recognize that I am still black. And trying to balance those two sides of yourself and accepting both of them is kind of a really weird thing to do. And I think Cooper does it very well. Even at the end, when, like, everything's quiet and everything's in black and white, Cooper's heart glows pink. So the reason why this is important, because all the different trolls, their hearts glow like the color of, like, their people group, their race, their nation, I don't know. And so the funk trolls glows purple, but Cooper still glows pink. Well, yes, you can also see this as ignoring literally everything that I just said about being a pop troll and funk troll and being both. But I like to believe that it's a metaphor for Cooper realizing that that's where he's from and that that's going to still be a part of him, but he's allowed to be something else now, or be able to try new things and learn about his own history that might not fully feel like his own, but still is. Again, I'm reaching harder than something that reaches hard, but I like to believe it's trying something. I also love how Cooper's the one to save the day. Not Poppy, not Branch, not even the main characters, but Cooper, the one who decided to leave his place to find out where he belongs and who he belongs to. So this is why Cooper's my favorite character, because I relate to him dearly, and he's adorable. I love my little four-legged boy. And again, one more notice, the vibe, and I will not take any criticism on this, the people in Vibe City are black. You're not taking that away from me. They're black. So, end of discussion. I think Poppy is a very interesting character when you apply the fact that pop trolls are colonialists, imperialists. So Poppy is a monarch, so she is in charge of the pop trolls. And with that, I think she's low-key a terrible queen. And I like how she properly gets called out when she is messing up terribly. And I like how eventually she ends up accepting that her viewpoint is wrong. So Poppy grew up completely with the pop trolls, and that's the only thing she ever knows. So when she leaves the pop trolls and starts exploring other music groups, other cultures, she automatically thinks hers is better. She calls the country music trolls as being too sad, and like, why would they be listening to things like that? And she just assumes that the reason is because they haven't heard good music. They haven't heard her type of music, the pop music, the better type of music. So she goes in with this idea that her culture and the things she grew up with is better. And her first instinct is to then bring that to the country music trolls and assuming they're going to like it. And Poppy eventually learns that no, she is wrong. The people who live here like their culture and they think theirs is good. It's not always a question of whether my culture is better than your culture. It's just about respecting the fact that someone else's culture is different than yours. And that's kind of the lesson that Poppy is forced to learn through her adventures, which I think, again, works very well for like an application to, I guess, white Americans, but I also say Americans as a whole, especially when like Americans and other Western countries really have this idea of like exceptionalism, or that we are better than others and therefore our culture is better than others, so therefore we should spread our culture everywhere, which goes into like modern day imperialism and how we have messed up many countries because of it. And so when Poppy realizes that Barb is bad, her first instinct is to prove how all trolls are the same. Why does it matter? We're all just trolls, so we should love each other. But when she gets like another person's viewpoint who's not just a pop troll, she realizes and is taught that being the same isn't the best thing. The idea of denying our differences, our different music, our different culture, doesn't do anything good for us because you're just denying who we are. The best thing to do is to accept that we are all different, and then and still be able to function with each other and talk to each other and love each other. And I wish a lot of places understood that, but we don't, so we're stuck here. And I'm gonna keep harping on that message because I really like it, and I think it's really cute, and I think it's really different because those other movies I mentioned earlier, Frozen 2, Captain Marvel, Thor Ragnarok, all Disney movies, by the way, don't really discuss it in the same way. And I really like that this movie, instead of just using the whole our ancestors were colonizers and were built off murder and genocide type thing, it's just like a fun character plot beat, they actually discuss how to fix that, which is why I think Trolls War Tour does the best. So that's it. So Poppy learns her lesson. She learns the idea of pluralism and the fact that we should accept each other's differences instead of trying to homogenize. And she becomes an even better queen with that, and she learns how to listen to people with different viewpoints because of that. And yes, I am hyper aware that the idea of, listen to viewpoints you don't agree with has a very slippery slope into don't call people out for being properly rude, racist, homophobic, transphobic, etc. But I like to believe the baseline idea of accepting people who have differences in you is a really good one. Yes, this movie doesn't do a good job of separating the two things between accepting people who have differences in you and then accepting people who are being actually terrible. But it's a kids movie. I'm not docking all these points because it doesn't do that. It's just something to be aware of. So woo, Poppy does good. Moving on to Branch. So I don't actually want to talk about Branch for a long time because he actually doesn't have that big of a part of the story. I do just want to briefly say that how Branch is more pessimistic, more cynical about Barb's intentions. And he seems to in general be much more chill with the idea of everyone having different cultures than him and letting that be a valid thing. And I like to believe, and this goes into the first movie that again I don't think I've seen. I might have seen it, I don't know. Because Branch in the first, especially in the first movie, is the outsider of the pop trolls. He is the minority, if you will. I'm trying to wink. Because he is a whole lot more grumpier. He doesn't really sing because singing killed his grandma. And he just kind of sits there and is really grumpy, and he's tired of people trying to force him to be a part of the happy pop troll culture that exists. And I think because of that, and again, this is going to the deep side, it makes sense that he himself is more not only cautious of Imperialism by Barb, but also he's much more aware that there are differences and that those differences can be kind of okay. So that's my quick Branch section. Like I said, it's not that long, but I did want to briefly talk about that. So before I wrap up, I do want to briefly talk about Barb and her entire plan, just so we fully understand the effect that imperialism can have on places. So Barb's entire plan is to collect all of the 6 strings and create one nation under rock. Does that sound like a familiar pledge to anyone else? No, just me? Okay. Because she believes her music is the best music. And if we just go under the belief that music kind of represents culture / ideals / values, and I think it's very easy to see where this imperialism starts to come into play. I think it is very easy to apply to real life, especially if you want to get into details. I feel like 1960s, 70s American imperialism really applies. My first thought goes with Korea, or just how America dealt with communism as a whole, where we decided, okay, this idea is bad because it's not ours, so what we're going to do is we're going to come to all these places, take over, insert our own ideas, and then leave. That's where's my tea? That's the tea. I guess that's more of a stretch, but it's a stretch I'm willing to take. That wasn't a pun. I don't know why I laughed. But yeah, I think that's it with me talking about Barb. Hopefully this made sense. I'm just going to get into final thoughts. Just in case you didn't understand it, let me clarify. Music equals culture. Culture can also be included in ethnicity, and race. So we see how the pipeline connects. If you're confused with that, rewatch the entire video and hopefully it'll make more sense. My final thoughts. I don't think this movie's good. Okay, I have confusing thoughts because on one hand, I wouldn't go into watching this movie expecting to view this as a racial masterpiece, because it is not. On the bright side, though, I do think it handles the idea of race better than other movies. However, this movie's still a kid's movie. It has a lot of really dumb humor that isn't really funny. Although it's strangely surreal. However, I do think if you're going to show your kid a movie, if you're trying to introduce your kid to a movie about race, I would put this over Zootopia. I think this does better than Zootopia, in my opinion. Because Zootopia does the thing where it's oh, we're all together, we're all animals, and what I like about Trolls World Tour is that specifically doesn't go in that route. It denies that route by saying, no, we are not, we are all different. Okay, technically Zootopia does too, but it does in a weirder way, so I just don't count it. And I definitely think out of the strings of late 2010s movie that decides to talk about imperialism and the effect of that by the majority group, I think it does the best job. I think it truly focuses on, and this is why if you're going to have a movie about race where the main character is the majority, I think this movie does it best because it really does help break down what to do once you realize that your nation is built off of lies and deceit and pain. That's not, because in Trolls World Tour, it's not just a fun plot point. It's a thing where Poppy needs to learn how to be a better leader because of it. But she learns to not ignore what the minority groups are saying about her leadership, about her country, about her nation. She learns through them that things need to change, and she learns how to change them by talking to these other people. And that's why I really like Trolls World Tour. So, if you watch this far, you know what I'm gonna say. You are automatically cooler than the rest of the population. Hopefully, my DreamWorks part 2 video will be coming out soon. We're gonna hope. But until then, I hope this has whetted your appetite for more DreamWorks content. And I hope you have a wonderful day. So I'm just gonna say peace.